Hi, welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State, my daily rendition about political affairs. And oh my God, do we have a packed agenda today. I was planning to lead with a story about John Kerry, and then 3 hours ago the New York Times broke a story about Hillary Clinton that they are putting tomorrow on the front page, and they interviewed 8 different staffers from Hillary to prepare the stories, so fasten your seatbelts. Hillary had what she called a faith advisor on her presidential race in 2008 and in 2016. 16, he wasn't on the payroll, but he was around the campaign, serving as a volunteer, working for another pro-Clinton front. And his name was Burns Strider, S-T-R-I-D-E-R. And in 2008, he was accused by a young female staffer of sexual harassment. And the woman testified that he would give her an inappropriate back rub, would kiss her, send her texts, including some late at night. And after they investigated it, the campaign manager, Patty Solis Doyle, who I suspect is the source on this, it's anonymously sourced, but Hillary fired her and then really dumped all over her. And I'll bet this is Patty's revenge. Anyway, when they found out about it, the campaign officials went to Hillary and said, let's fire this creep. And Hillary said, nope, we're not going to fire him. We'll dock him a few weeks' pay. We'll require him to go to counseling, but he stays on the payroll. And the woman who was sexually harassed, who was 30 years old, was herself transferred to another job or another assignment, basically fired. So this is Hillary. Right in the middle of her own campaign, her faith advisor, of all people, sexually harasses this young woman and doesn't get fired, doesn't get ostracized, simply gets docked a couple of weeks' pay and kept on the payroll. But there's more. Then after... By the way, the details on all of this, and this goes on a little bit, and you should study them and salivate over them, is that it is contained in a column pinned to the top of this. And read the whole column, because you'll just find it unbelievable. So after this faith advisor got sidelined, in the election of 2016, he didn't work for the campaign. He worked for a front Hillary had set up under David Brock, who was one of her acolytes, and called something like Values or something like that, American Values Network. And Strider worked there for a couple of months, and then he was fired from that because he sexually harassed a second woman who worked for him in the same office. So this guy is a serial sexual harasser. And yet he maintains his position with Hillary. During the campaign of 2016, and for a decade before, he would email a spiritual and inspiring note to Hillary every single day, and they exchanged emails frequently, constantly. His exact words are that He said that they exchanged emails frequently, usually several times, usually every day, at least once every day. And his email to her when she lost the election quoted scripture, and that scripture what made it into the foreword to Hillary's book. I believe the dedication to her book, What Happened. And then it turned out, this was about 5 months ago, that the passage he quoted had been purloined from another spiritual book that had put it in its dedication. So he was a plagiarist in addition to all of the other stuff. And Hillary refused to remove it from the book, and it bears that to this day. So, I mean, oh my God. Now, his job in Hillary's campaign was to oversee outreach to people of faith. That's a quote from her campaign. And it's just incredible that this was permitted to happen. Now, this this proof of sexual harassment, and this litany of Hillary not responding to it, not believing it, blaming the woman who was sexually harassed, firing her, relocating her, not blaming him, refusing to remove him, is mirrored by the way she dealt with Harvey Weinstein, who is, as you know, the poster boy for sexual harassment. Hillary's relationship with Weinstein went on despite some very explicit warnings about his track record of sexual harassment. The actress, Tina Brown, who was one of Hillary's major supporters, warned her about Weinstein, and so did Lisa Dunham, an actress. And Lisa told Hillary to be careful of him. I just want to let you know that Harvey's a rapist, and that he's going to come out, it's going to come out at some point. I think it's really a bad idea for him to host fundraisers and be involved, because it's an open secret in Hollywood that he has a problem with sexual assault. And despite that advice, Hillary had fundraisers at each of the 3 homes that Weinstein owned. For 2 years in a row, she rented the house next to him in Amagansett, where he had parties on Long Island. Days after the election, she and Bill had dinner with Weinstein to discuss making a TV docudrama about her failed campaign. She waited to condemn Weinstein for a month, despite warnings from Dunham and Tina Brown. Then she said he was a donor, saying he wasn't a friend, he was just a donor, but scarcely a distant one. And days after the election, she was socializing with Harvey Weinstein, and was one of the last people to put distance between herself and him. So this exposure is shocking, and it shows how hypocritical Hillary is in condemning sexual harassment. Now, anybody that needed to hear this episode must have amnesia, because Bill Clinton did the same damn thing. There was a woman named Kathleen Willey, whose husband was despondent, and in fact that day committed suicide. And Kathleen was in the White House begging Clinton for a job. She had been a volunteer in the campaign. And Bill backed her up against the wall, started feeling her breasts, tried to put his hand under her skirt, tried to kiss her, and she ran crying from the Oval Office. Linda Tripp, who was sitting outside, intercepted her and heard the story firsthand. And then, of course, there's Jennifer Flowers, who, by the way, watches this program. And hi, Jennifer. You and I are fellow victims of Bill Clinton. He never sexually harassed me, but he did try to beat me up.
Oh, boy.
We'll tell that story some other episode. But Jennifer got a job over a black woman who was entitled to it in Arkansas on civil service. And Clinton pulled the strings to get Flowers into the job. Now, sexual harassment means not only punishing somebody for not having sex, but it also means rewarding someone for doing it. And then when Monica Lewinsky came along, and there was a need to put distance between Bill and her, Bill's deputy chief of staff, Evelyn Lieberman, basically a Hillary appointee, took Monica out of the White House and got her a job at the Defense Department, where she wouldn't be an ongoing temptation. And at the same time, Bill called up Vernon Jordan, his crony, and got Jordan to get her a job through Bill Richardson at the United Nations, where she would also be in New York and away from him. So Bill's history of sexual, and then of course Juanita Broderick, where he went far more than sexual harassment, but actually raped her. So these stories are legion, and Hillary's insensitivity, her willingness to cover it up, her enabling it. I mean, what do you call it when a guy gets called for this conduct and he stays on the job? That's enabling. And then he gets another job, probably with Hillary's reference, and then he knows that it's okay, and he does it again. This is Hillary Clinton in the most hypocritical of positions you can imagine.
Well, Tony Garlowich says, Hillary doesn't care about anything as long as she is getting something out of it, and when she gets caught up with it, it's someone else's fault. That's kind of a common theme.
Who's that, Harvey?
Tony Garlowich.
But it's more than that, Tony. Hillary digs in her heels. She's very, very, very stubborn. And when someone is accused of something, she doubles down in defending them and won't listen to anybody who talks differently. And poor Patty Solis Doyle was humiliated at Hillary's hands as campaign manager and sent off to Siberia, and this must have been one of the reasons in the 2008 campaign. And this posture of enabling and defending sexual predators really, I mean, if this were any other crime, if this were murder or rape instead of sexual harassment, Hillary could be indicted as an accessory after the fact. Somebody who hides a murderer or who gives him a cover can themselves go to jail. And this conduct by Hillary is just outrageous.
Sorry, lost my place here. Keep on going.
Now, the other thing that I want to talk about that also is, I'm sorry, you found something?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Thomas Hillebrand says, notice Hillary has shut the hell up lately?
Yeah, Tom, I was about to mention that. Eileen and I were talking about it just the other day. You don't hear a peep out of Hillary or Bill or even Chelsea these days. Nothing. They're absolutely quiet. One reason is, of course, it's the 20th anniversary of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Another reason, of course, is that the U.S. attorney in Little Rock is investigating the Clinton Foundation. And probably another reason is that she knew this New York Times story was coming, because the Times apparently spent some time interviewing 8 different staffers from Hillary's campaign to prepare the article. Whenever you hear sounds of silence coming from Chappaqua, you know something's coming.
Jim Tomlinson wants to know, who gave Bill Clinton the nickname Saturday Night Bill? Do you know?
Me. It was, somebody used it once, and I read it. Who was it? Might have been Ann Coulter. Might have been Peggy Noonan. But it was one of them, and I heard them say it. And then I titled my book, Sunday Morning President and Saturday Night Bill. The paperback version of Behind the Oval Office has that title. So it's, and the point is that on Sunday morning he's as contrite as he can be, and on Saturday night he's a prowler.
Well, we're on the subject of Hillary and the Clintons. Benny Trent wants to know, I would like you to ask Dick to give us some history on Hillary's parents. I haven't heard much on them.
Hillary's father was a strict disciplinarian. There's a story she tells that he said, put the cap back on the tube of toothpaste. And at one point, he noticed, he went into her bathroom and saw she had not done so. And he opened the window in their Chicago area home. It was snowing. And threw the cap out into the snow and made her go outside and find the cap. He was a Republican, a Goldwater Republican, and a very strong, demanding type, never praising her and never cutting her slack, and really a damn shame. Hillary's mother was herself a mother of a broken home. She was herself a single mother when she was growing up, and by all accounts was warm and loving, but Hillary's upbringing was a very difficult one. She talks about it at nauseating length in her 2 books, so go and read them.
Excellent. And Richard Reel, he actually had a question yesterday and I missed it, but it's a good one. Have you read Andrew McCarthy's article in the National Review about how Obama conspired to obstruct and successfully obstructed justice in the Clinton email scandal?
Yeah, I mentioned it without giving Andrew credit, which I should have.
Okay.
He's great. He's just terrific in the National Review. He says that every pipeline has 2 ends to it, the sender of the email and the receiver of the email. And they're both equally liable when the email is illegal. And in this case, Hillary sent emails on a private server to the president. he must have seen it was a private server, and he answered the emails, and that both of them are culpable for that exchange. And it's his thesis that Hillary was never indicted for that because Obama would have put Obama in a very vulnerable position because he didn't call her on it and he participated in those email exchanges.
And he also wanted to know, is this matter irreversible? Will Obama or Clinton ever be brought to account?
Well, Clinton probably will. I think that the investigation into Hillary's emails will be an important part of any special prosecutor that gets nominated, which I think is coming soon.
Excellent. And Hector Morales asks, why don't the reps leak the memo like Dems have leaked secrets?
Well, he's referring to the memo prepared by the House Intelligence Committee detailing the abuses of the FISA law by President Obama. And the Intelligence Committee members have each seen it, but they've not leaked it, and it's not to be released publicly, although I would expect that next week it will be. The answer is that Republicans follow the law, and they generally don't leak classified stuff. And the Intelligence Committee is particularly vulnerable because the CIA never wanted to trust them, never wanted to take them into their confidence, claiming they were afraid of leaks. In fact, they were mainly afraid of oversight. And as a result, the committee members are quite clear that they do not leak. Now, what I thought was going to be our main story today is about John Kerry, and you'll find a column on this also appended to the column. And again, with all of these broadcasts, I try to do my best to summarize it in a few minutes, but read the gory details in these columns. John Kerry, former Secretary of State, met with Agha, A-G-H-A, Mohammed
Mohammad or something like that. Was it Mohammed? It was
whatever.
Mohammad
a staffer to Mohammad Abbas, who was the head of the Palestinian Authority. And I met with him in London just last week. And the Jerusalem Post ran a story, probably sourced by Israeli intelligence, that in the meeting, Kerry told Agha to pass on to Abbas his advice, which is, quote, to stand firm against Trump's proposals, not to give in, that Trump would be gone soon, that he probably wouldn't last another year into the presidency, and then America will presumably return to normal, and he should not yield, be strong, stand firm. Now, when we saw this story, Eileen said, isn't this a violation of the Logan Act? I said, damn right it is. The Logan Act was passed in 1799 as part of the Alien and Sedition Acts that John Adams signed. And it was originally designed because of the potential war with France, which never eventuated but came very close. And it prohibited any American citizen from dealing with a foreign power and talking to them when there was U.S. public policy at play. Didn't have to oppose the public policy, but that was the concept. Nobody was convicted of it. Somebody was prosecuted a few years later, a farmer who was giving advice to the French. But then when Michael Flynn called up the Russian ambassador after Obama imposed sanctions over the Russian meddling in our campaign, and said, don't respond to this, we're coming into office in a few weeks. We're going to revisit this whole issue, and let us do that before we get into a tit-for-tat sanctions war with each other. The phone call was intercepted by the NSA. Flynn was unmasked on the motion of Susan Rice illegally, and then Flynn was leaked to the press. Flynn then lied about it, his contribution, and he was fired 20 days into his term as National Security Advisor, and is now facing indictment by Mueller, who's already using that to squeeze him for information that implicates Trump in the meddling issue. And there we have a case of Logan Act's violation, where the guy that did it was the appointed National Security Advisor, who in 21 days would have taken office. And it was an intervention that made sense, was in line with the policy of the incoming president, but because of the technicality that it took place in early January, not at the end of January, he was technically in violation of the Logan Act. This is nothing like that. There's no prospect of Kerry joining the administration anytime. He's clearly out of office. He's totally a private citizen. And this intervention is adverse to the wishes of the American government. It is precisely telling an adversary of the United States who we're dealing with diplomatically not to pay attention to what the president says, that he'll be gone in a few months or a year, and don't worry about it. Stand firm. Don't give in to the demands of the president. Now, if there was ever anything that violated not just the letter, but the spirit of the Logan Act, so this is it. The story just broke a day or two ago, and I think this is the first time anyone's made a connection with the Logan Act. And it really needs to be pursued. This should be on the session's agenda to pursue this, because it's an on-point violation. A private citizen attempting to conduct diplomacy on behalf of the United States by expressly contradicting the policy of the government and telling the foreign adversary to ignore what the president says.
Well, James Cody wants to know, is what Kerry did considered sedition or treason?
Well, treason would be a matter of opinion, as with sedition. It is illegal. It's a violation of a law. That law was passed as part of the Espionage and Sedition Acts, so it borders on both of those, but it clearly is a violation of the law.
And Linda Gale Hudson says, did you hear Soros' scathing attack on Facebook and Google yesterday at the Davos Summit? If he has his way, he will shut down our only way to hear the truth.
Yeah, well, there's a huge effort by the left to try to discipline Facebook and Google, and to try to use it to shut off programs like this one, which we're broadcasting over Facebook. And I consciously feel could be a sword hanging over my head because I am conservative and I espouse views that are at variance with the head of Facebook. I forgot.
Right, Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg, yeah. And
strange things happen on here.
And he's been very. He hasn't shut me down, to his credit. Mm-hmm. He could. And there's a real effort to try to censor social media. And originally it arises, as most of these efforts do, over things like pornography or hate speech, mm-hmm. or rousing up terrorist groups. But there is a chance that they'll apply this to political speech. And then we'll have to go through the cable television networks. There is something I want to raise with you. Renee will talk about it further. There's a thing called OTT, which translates to over the top, which is a service provided by all of the various content providers on television. Netflix, Amazon, whole bunch of them. And they permit TV programming on a separate network by people like me. This program itself could be rebroadcast or broadcast initially over OTT, which would put it beyond the reach of either of these social media firms. I don't know if you have it or if you've ever watched it. I haven't. I'm about to learn about it. But that could be our government in exile if we have to do it.
Yeah,
but on the other hand, I have to say that Facebook met with me. They know my content. The person who's a political representative on Facebook used to work for the Republican National Committee, and I worked with her in that capacity. I've never received a word of censorship from them or a word of reprimand or anything. They've been very generous in providing the space and in helping me with advertising and helping me with technical problems. So I love Facebook. But it is true that Soros is foaming at the mouth to try to rein it in.
Well, the over-the-top, it's actually their channels within this within this company, and Newsmax has one on there,
right.
And also CRTV.
Yeah, Mark Levin has one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we're learning as we go. Okay, let's see what we have here. How is it Susan Rice hasn't been indicted for unmasking Flynn? Ainsworth Hunt wants to know.
Well, they're not up to it yet. The Justice Department is just beginning this, and we don't know if there'll be a special prosecutor or it'll be done by DOJ. We'll have to see. It's early in the process.
And John Simon wants to know, did Dennis Rodman violate the Logan Act with North Korea?
Yeah, he probably did. Now, of course, the issue with him would be, was there any diplomacy involved? It's not illegal to go to a country when you're a basketball star and shoot some hoops and just make a ceremonial appearance, which may have the effect of bolstering the regime you're visiting. But the issue is attempting to conduct diplomacy, which is clearly what John Kerry did.
We have a new viewer here, Lisa Brunken-Coleman. I haven't seen that name before. What will happen to Obama legally?
Well, Lisa, that depends on what he did. At the moment, it's possibly an abuse of the FISA Act, where he went to the court, may have gone to the court, and may have asked them to authorize wiretapping his political opponents or the Trump transition team after Hillary lost the election. We have to see what he does, and we have to see what culpability there might be. But before they get to Obama, they've got Hillary, and there's a lot more there.
Nancy Aronson wants your opinion of what Obama's legacy may be.
Well, when John Keats, the poet, died, he was very self-deprecatory. He died very young. World-famous poet, maybe the most famous ever to live. And he wrote, "Here lies one," as his epitaph, "Here lies one whose name is written in water." K-E-A-T-S, and the tide comes in and washes it away. And I think that all of the ingredients of the Trump White House are being washed away. Obamacare is gone. It'll be reduced to a tiny little program that won't mean much. His policy of appeasement around the world is being reversed. His toleration of ISIS is being overcome as it's been wiped out. His whole policy of excessive regulation in the name of climate change and in the name of all kinds of issues is being overridden by Trump. And it's hard to see. We do not have a precedent, really, for activist policies of an administration that have been completely wiped out by the new administration. Closest we came was when Eisenhower took over after 20 years of Roosevelt and Truman, of the New Deal and the Fair Deal. There was all of the social welfare legislation the Republicans had opposed, Social Security and others, and everybody said, will he repeal it? Eisenhower was a Republican, and he chose not to. He just let it stay there, stopped it from going further, but did not repeal anything, ratifying that. And we'll have to see what goes on with Obama. Now, I want to talk a little bit about DACA, the Dreamers. First of all, the stakes have been raised here. It looks like there are not 800,000 of them, but perhaps as many as 3.4 million or 1.8 million. Both of those estimates have been floating around. So the impact, should they acquire citizenship, could be very significant. It could really affect American elections. Now, Trump has made a proposal on DACA that I think is an excellent one. It says that after a waiting period, they haven't specified how long, but Schumer in a proposal said 10 to 12 years, which would be fine. They then can apply for citizenship, but not for another decade. And that in the interim, they can stay here with work permits, which are renewable every 3 years, and which I think is fair. They've never lived outside the United States. They came here without knowingly breaking our laws. They were just in tow with their parents, and I don't think they should be punished for that. On the other hand, I don't think they should be permitted to change the fabric of our country by being given citizenship and voting rights up front or anything close to it. In return for that, Trump says this is going to trigger massive amnesty. Everybody is going to want to come to the United States. They'll be lining up at the border, just like they were in 2015 when Obama first issued this executive order in 2014 or 15. And 400,000 kids from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador came to the United States because they all heard there was amnesty. and that they would get it too. As it turns out, they did. They're here, nobody's throwing them out. But what Trump is saying is install measures to stop that before you do the amnesty. So he wants to build his wall. He wants $25 billion to do that. He wants a new immigration law that cuts in half the number of legal immigrants and says those who come here have to be good for our economy, be able to hold jobs workers that we need, have education, and so on. He also wants to have employers have E-Verify, where they can type in the name of the applicant for a job and see if he's here legally. They want to end chain migration so that the new DACA people who are given some kind of amnesty can't bring their whole families in there. He wants to eliminate the visa lottery program that led to that terrorist in New York from Bangladesh getting into the country. So those are very good bills. Now, Schumer has just said he's not going to go along with that compromise. But Schumer ultimately has no leverage for two reasons. First of all, they tried shutting down the government over this, and it backfired massively. And I don't think they're going to try it again. And secondly, Trump has the authority to end the DACA program, as he did 5 months ago. Now, when he ended it with an executive order, he said, I'm going to give you all till March 6th for Congress to fix this and enact a proactive policy. And then if I like it, I'll sign it. If not, I'll just let the program die. So he has tremendous leverage, and we need to see what he's going to do with it.
Well, first of all, Mike Mulvey wrote in, like an idiot, I never paid attention to my political science classes, so now when I listen to you, I go look things up and learn. Better late than never. Thanks, Mr. Morris.
Well, thank you.
It's Mike Mulvey.
I appreciate that. Hey, you weren't an idiot. If you listened, you wouldn't get the truth either.
That's true.
Now, Trump has just been speaking in Davos, this confab of all of the world's economic leaders, and he made some great points. First of all, he said, my slogan may be America first, but it is not America alone, and we're going to work with other countries and develop positive relationships. One of the big ones he's done is bilateral trade deals, and this has never been really explained adequately. I tried it a couple of days ago. I'll try it again now. The preference of the globalists is an international agreement signed by all the countries of the world in which there would not be tariffs, there would not be trade barriers. And we've had two of them, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade in the 60s and the World Trade Organization in the 90s, 80s and 90s. Trump says these agreements are never honored. Countries always cheat on them. The enforcement mechanisms are weak. What I want to do is bilateral trade deals with every major country around. So India, for example, is part of these broad agreements. And Trump says, no, let India and the United States sign a deal where in return for India getting trade preferences on A, B, and C, America will get trade preferences on D, E, and F. And that's the way to address this issue, because we have a built-in enforcement mechanism. If you don't honor preference A, we won't honor preference D. And you have a perfect way of making this work in the interests of each country. And that's what Trump is doing. Now the liberals say, oh, you're standing in the way of globalism. And Trump is saying, no, I'm just looking at negotiating a rational deal that helps the United States and accomplishes some of the objectives of the party we're negotiating with, as opposed to NAFTA and the Pacific Rim and the World Trade Organization, which are this principle of blanket global agreements, which are really never enforced and which are really violated time and time again. He also said in Davos that America is a great place for investment. He said America is open for business, and that was so true. You look at the fact that Apple is repatriating $200 billion it had sequestered overseas and is bringing it back to the United States to give us a shot at using that money. And you look at all of these companies that have given their workers bonuses or pay raises based on the tax cut. Nancy Pelosi recently said, these are crumbs from the table. Well, I think most workers wouldn't mind a $1,500 crumb now or then.
Exactly.
Now, this is not like what Bush used to do, where he'd promulgate a tax cut and he'd send out a check for $500 to everybody, which had no effect on the economy. Because when people got the check, they said, this is the last one I'm ever getting. The economic policies of this government haven't changed. We'll end up in a recession, and I don't know if I'm ever going to see it again, so I'm going to save this money or pay down my electric bill or my mortgage or my phone bill. So, but what Trump is doing is saying this is permanent tax relief. This is simply the first year of it. And you can make plans based on it to invest money, to spend money, and to grow the economy.
Daniel Morris asks, so what do you make of Obama's doing a world campaign after he was out of his office?
Well, that if you're asking that question in terms of the Logan Act, I don't think it's a problem because he didn't go to specific countries and propose that. But, you know, Obama doesn't get that he's out of office, and we should. Now, there was also a revelation while Trump was in Davos that he had instructed his staff to fire Mueller as special prosecutor, and that his White House counsel threatened to resign, and he rescinded the order. And the newspapers are blowing this up as if it's a huge deal. Well, it is true, probably, that in a moment of rage, Trump said that. And certainly Trump would want to get rid of Mueller because he needs getting rid of his transparent anti-Trump bias, his predetermined desire to get Trump any way he can, to hire a staff of like-minded people is visible for everybody to see. And the president has the authority to get rid of Mueller anytime he wants to. It just all hell might break loose, and a lot of people might condemn him, and it might have an impact on his national popularity and job approval, so he doesn't do it. But nothing wrong with thinking about it, and that's really what they're hollering at him about.
Deanna Crossan asks, please tell us your thoughts on Sessions.
I think that he was a conservative senator from Alabama who got caught up in the whirlwind around the Russia meddling stuff, recused himself, and then I think he got rocked back by the Justice Department, by the bureaucrats, by the FBI, that came in there and treated him as a hostile person, held him hostage in a sense. And I think he was not prepared for that. I think since then, with the counseling, advice, and support and criticism of his boss, Trump, I think he's recovered a lot of his mettle and a lot of his gravitas. He's got his specific gravity back. And in very important ways, he's forced the FBI and the Justice Department to turn over documents, to make people available for questioning, and I think he's doing a much better job now than he did before. The key question is, will he name a special prosecutor for the FBI and Hillary and the emails and all of that? And I think eventually he's going to have to. Now, there's a very interesting story that I'm sure you may have been following about Lester Holt, the correspondent for NBC, which is totally in the tank to the left. And Holt visited the Olympic site in South Korea. It's going to start in a few weeks. And in the course of it, he accepted an invitation to bring a camera crew up to North Korea. And included in his journey was the NBC News president, Oppenheim, who went with him, which is unusual for one of the higher-ups to actually go on a shoot. And the North Koreans treated him grandly. They brought him to a ski resort where he found happy North Koreans careening down the slopes, skiing and enjoying their winter vacation and enjoying the air. And it turned out this was a Potemkin village. That phrase was initiated 100 years ago because there was a czar, I think it was Peter, or maybe Ivan, who invited foreigners to come to Russia to see how wonderful everybody lived. And he ordered villages specifically built so that they would look beautiful, and beautiful housing and great sanitation, and invited the foreign journalists to look at it, and had specially selected people live in it. And they were totally phony. It had nothing to do with the way the average Russian lived. And they were called Potemkin villages. And that's really what sucked Holt in North Korea. They brought him here and they said, oh, these are just typical North Koreans enjoying our winter wonderland. And he didn't get it. He reported on it at face value. He let himself be sucked in completely. And NBC still has not apologized for that. Various people on the NBC staff have spoken out about Holt being so vulnerable. One said he lent himself to propaganda. Another said that he gave cushy coverage to North Korea. And it's just an example of how much in the tank Holt and NBC is to the left. They did the same thing in 2008 in the Winter Olympics, where they were held in China, where they sugar-coated everything, and they went around talking about how wonderful China was, and they didn't. Was that Winter Olympics or Beijing Olympics were during the summer, and they did nothing to talk about the human rights record or any of those issues.
William Martin asks, how can Debbie Wasserman Schultz still be out of jail?
Well, the issue that she's concerned with is that she hired a Pakistani guy named Amin, or Aswan, I think, Awan, who turned out to be a spy. And he brought 3 members of his family in, and through her computer, he interacted with 15 other House offices and downloaded confidential national security information and shipped it to Pakistan, to presumably to Al-Qaeda. And we don't know if it was with her approval or how much she knew. That's still under investigation. We know he did abscond with $300 million and was intercepted at the airport and arrested and so on. But I don't think it's reached the stage yet where we can make a case that Schultz was anything other than the victim in that case. Now, as you know, these broadcasts are sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. And I just want you to know that gold has had its best year in decades. It went up by 16% over the course of the last year, and has increased 31% in value since 2007. I'm sorry, 75% in value since 2007. It never went down during the crash of 07 and 08, but continued to rise. And it shows every sign of continuing to rise at a record pace because countries are moving away from currency. They're simply saying, I'm not going to put my life savings in something a politician prints at will. I want that currency backed by something other than the word of the Federal Reserve Board that they're going to honor it. And with the dollar losing something like 10 or 12% of its value every year, they're not going to let their savings be eroded at that kind of rate. So call the Patriot Gold Group, the number on the screen here, and get yourself started investing in something that doesn't flake away, like silver or gold. Now on Sunday, I hope you join me in watching the Super Bowl a week from Sunday. But don't look for an ad paid for by American veterans, which says "Stand Up for America," which is a put-down, obviously, aimed at those athletes that knelt during the national anthem. And NBC says that it is going to cover the entire Super Bowl from beginning to end, including the players kneeling during the national anthem. Most of the other networks have censored that out and only begin their coverage with the kickoff. And NBC is not doing that and is turning down an advertisement that says "Stand Up for America." The more you look at this network, the more you understand that it is something like Russian television, as opposed to anything fair and objective.
By the way, Hector Morales wrote in and explained that the OTT, it's a separate box, like your cable box, that people would have. So,
like your Firebox?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Well, I'll learn about it.
Yes,
we
will.
About it.
And Daniel Manley says, I think that President Trump has successfully taken the DACA away from the Dems. If they don't take the offer President Trump made, then they will be seen as against immigrants.
Yeah, then their movement will send 800,000 to 2 million people home. And they're not going to do that. Trump has them over a barrel, and Trump should not give in. That's pretty clear. Now, I want to thank my sharers. These are the folks who send my broadcasts all over the place by sharing them with friends and associates and people who they know. And I want to thank them for doing it. There's Daisy Nunez. There's Anthony Hoban, Hoban, Harry Spencer, Robert Adams, Derek Wilburn of Rocky Mountain Black Conservatives, Annie DeFondi,
who's in Facebook jail right now, I just learned.
You mean, what do you mean?
She can't share because she shares so much, they lock her up.
You shared too much, Annie, but thank you for giving yourself to the cause. Aaron Tibbetts, James Lubash, Elizabeth Warren, not the senator, but my good friend. I've been in touch with a lot. And Serena
Vartavarian. Yes.
Vartavarian.
And
Serena, thank you.
And don't forget the quote.
Oh, yeah, right. It's Friday.
It's Friday. Guess who's back?
I got a whole new list of Churchill quotes for you. This one is... I got to get my accent going. And unfortunately, my tongue surgery does not get in the way. I had tongue surgery 6 weeks ago, yesterday. Removed a third of my tongue. Grafted it with an artificial tongue from my forearm, replete with blood vessels and nerves, done by geniuses at Yale New Haven Hospital. And listen to how I can talk. 6 weeks ago.
You've come a long way.
I only had them remove the liberal part of my tongue. Conservative parts still there. And Churchill said, in the course of my life, I have often had to eat my words. And I must confess that I've always found it a wholesome diet. Now, Churchill, started as a liberal, started as a conservative, because his father was, became a liberal, and then switched back to conservatives. And he was accused of the ultimate flip-flopping. If it were today, there'd be a weather vane ad on television against him. But he had a great comeback. A woman accused him of changing sides, and he said, "Madam,